Welcome to Eastlake. We are an inclusive faith community dedicated to the free search for truth and meaning, seeking to live out a more just and life-giving spirituality in the modern world. We see faith as less about doctrines and dogmas demanding total agreement, but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others. What unites us is a growing awareness that life is a gift and love is the point. We welcome the entire human family, regardless of race, age, creed, physical abilities, marital or economic status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. So if you are curious and have come to see, if you are tired and have come to rest, if you are grateful and have come to share, if you are journeying and have come to grow, if you are wounded and have come to heal, if you are joyful and have come to shine, welcome home. Today, we hear from Kent Dobson as he begins our new series, Do You Believe in God? Please check the description for links to our quarterly Spotify playlist and guided meditation.
Hey everybody, Kent Dobson here. Thanks for being a part of the Eastlake community, and I am honored to be teaching again. I've taught on and off at Eastlake, I don't know, for 5 or 6 years is my guess. And it's really good to be back. And let me ask you a question. What kind of spiritual community would ask the teacher, what kind of spiritual community would do a series with the title, Do You Believe in God? Yeah, Eastlake might do something like that. What a strange and perilous and alluring invitation. And I have to be honest with you, it's a question I like to avoid. Do you believe in God? It makes me uncomfortable. It probably makes you uncomfortable just in the sense that, isn't it true that we often say we believe things and act as if we don't? To what extent do our beliefs correspond to what's real, to reality with a capital R? Aren't often our beliefs aspirational, sometimes delusional? I mean, we put a lot of stock in them, but they're sometimes like a vapor, like a wind. So I like to avoid the question, do you believe in God? And the first thing I thought of when I got a text message that said, do you want to speak on this topic? First thing I thought of was a quotation from Jung, which I'm not going to give you. In fact, I thought, now why would I start a talk, do you believe in God, by quoting someone else? Oh, I know why, because I'd like to avoid it. I'd like to not say. And that has a place. I think we don't have to always put all of our cards on the table. Jesus has that kind of terrible line, do not cast your pearls before swine. I'm not calling any of you swine. I'm just saying it's like, no, some things are precious in a way and can't be given away so easily. That's a little how I feel about this question, but I'm going to try to address it. I want to try to look at it. I want to try to say whether or not I believe in God. I want to actually ask the question, do you believe in God? And what would it look like for you to wrestle with such a thing? And is that even the best way of putting it? And so that's where I'm going. And I just got back from Israel. As some of you may know, I've been leading tours there for a long time, since 2003 when I first moved there as a graduate student. And my own trips, my own way of leading the trips, of course, has morphed and changed and grown and evolved, and yet they're still rooted in the ancient discipline of pilgrimage. And pilgrimage exists in just about every religion that I know of. it's a kind of living or walking prayer. Pilgrimages, where kind of a physical journey somewhere mirrors the internal journey or harmonizes with the internal journey, and that's why I still do them. It's not because I want to give people a crash course in biblical history and religion, and although I do a bit of that, it's not for the information. It's because walking with an open heart shapes us in certain ways. The way in which we expose ourselves to other people and to a landscape and to ancient texts, and what else is there? And pilgrimage is kind of like an intensification of something. It's a moment in time, like a liminal passage, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it activates us in just the right way. So anyway, I'm just coming back from that, and it was really an amazing trip. I led it with a friend of mine from Denver, Michael Hidalgo, who we've led now several trips together, kind of co-led them, and that was a real gift. But because of COVID, nobody's been anywhere for 2 years, and Israel, Palestine, and the sites that we visited were very empty, and some of them were the emptiest that I've ever experienced them, and that had a kind of strange quality to it. And even some of my friends who live in Israel were just talking about how strange it is the last couple of years, because Israel is one of those places that has like kind of a specialness attached to it. People go there with high expectations, and just numbers alone, there's a certain vibe or energy with that, where you're in a place, and let's say you're in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is right in the center of the old city of Jerusalem that commemorates the death and resurrection of Jesus, and there are people from all over the world. There's a certain kind of buzz there, whether you like it or not, whether you're drawn to it or not. It's like there's an activation there. So for it to be empty is interesting to me. And I was imagining the priests. I watched a Franciscan procession when I was in there, and I was just imagining, I was like, oh my God, they did this with no one around for 2 years. Like, just think about that. Going in and, shaking the incense and lighting candles and kneeling and going through the rituals and sharing the space with other Christian groups and communities, monastic ones, I mean, alone in emptiness. What a strange phenomenon. Why? Do they believe in God? You might even ask, where is God? And that's why we have sacred places. I mean, sacred places are supposed to mark something, supposed to mark contact or the possibility of contact. And yet also, as modern people, it makes us uncomfortable. I mean, are we supposed to conclude God is here and not there? There's this idea that God is everywhere, but sometimes that also feels like, well, then God is nowhere. Or people say everything is spiritual, and I want to say, yeah, but then nothing feels spiritual. And I know a lot of things that do not feel that spiritual. So human beings maybe have always been in this conversation, this line between sacred space and ordinary space, and the passage between spaces or between worlds. And that's what altered states of consciousness are like. It's like our awareness shifts and we find ourselves almost in a different geography and then the ordinary geography. And I don't know, it's part of the dance. It's part of the dance around the divine, we could say. But anyway, I was starting to think about the emptiness of the sepulcher, and sepulcher means tomb in Latin, and it also, it's funny, like you go there, and if you go, the sepulcher is like a church within a church within a church, and inside the smallest room is where the tomb was of Jesus, and of course he's not there. That's like the point of Christianity. He's not there. It's empty. It's vacant. There's an abyss inside. There's a solitude. There's an emptiness. A God of emptiness, of the void. I mean, let that, feel that for a moment. I was always struck by, there's a story in antiquity where Pompey apparently comes to Jerusalem, and he marches into the Holy of Holies, and that's the inner room within the inner room of the temple, and there's nothing there, and that seems right on one level. Yeah, do you believe in that God? I don't know if you've ever read the story of the golden calf. Even if you haven't, you've heard of it, like Moses is up on a mountain, and the Bible says that the people were like, we don't know whatever happened to this fellow Moses. And they convince Aaron the priest to make something, and they gather their gold, and Aaron has this funny line that comes a little later in the story. He says, I don't know, I threw this gold into the fire and out came this golden calf. And they found objects like this in antiquity. They're very small. I mean, that's kind of the image. But the line, most people think about that story of Moses comes down from the mountain. He's got the 10 commandments on these tablets, and one of them says, make no graven image. And he sees them all worshiping the golden calf. And we all assume, they're worshiping idols or they're worshiping other gods. And he smashes the tablets and gets super pissed and has to make another pair. But that's not what the text says exactly, that they were worshiping other gods. In Hebrew, it says this. Aaron says, behold, Elohim, who brought you out of Egypt. Elohim is a plural word for God, so that's intriguing in and of itself. You could translate it gods, but, preachers aren't going to often tell you that. But that's the word, Elohim, gods. But it seems to be a kind of stand-in for the God of Israel, Elohim. And so what is Aaron saying? He's saying, this is Elohim who brought you out of Egypt. Like, it's hard to stand next to emptiness. It's hard to stand next to the abyss. It's hard to say, I believe in a God who's ineffable, who is fundamentally unknown. So there's a craving for a crucifix or a golden calf or an object, or I'm not even saying that impulse is wrong. I'm saying I have it. And it's amazing that a 3,000-year-old book would say that, yeah, but that's missing the point in some way. There is no image of the divine. It's funny that about, I don't know, if you do the math, something like, a few hundred years later, there's a king in Israel who does the same thing. He repeats the story. His name is Rehoboam, king of the northern tribes, and he wants people to come to his place of worship at a place called Dan, and instead of Jerusalem, because the kingdom is divided at this point in Israel's history. And so he does the same thing. He makes a golden calf, and the priests say, this is Elohim, and come here and worship. And that's also an odd story, because haven't they read Exodus? Well, probably not. I mean, they probably heard of the story, for sure. It's not like people had little copies of their Bible. But two stories saying that there's an abyss when we come close to the ineffable. It's ineffable. It's like Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And has he forsaken Jesus? He has. There's an emptiness there. There's a cry unto the silent heavens. Do you believe in God? Or do you believe in our artificial constructs? The golden calf we wear around our neck, the doctrine statement we've been told is non-negotiable. The ways that we've said the divine has to happen on my terms, And I think, if there's a God, the divine must be patient with these kinds of childlike attempts to name the divine. Fine, why not? We're all children. We never fully leave the childlike state, and we're all immature on one level, and we're all trying to name the unnameable, and I think that's part of it. when I was working for a megachurch, I remember there was a phrase that kept going around when we were really pushing against the theology of our own institution, and it was like, the phrase was, well, my Jesus would never, fill in the blank. And yeah, that's God on the ego's terms. And I think it's something like, yeah, fine. For a while. But would you like to step into the Holy of Holies, the emptiness, the abyss, where the trapdoor opens and the bottom falls out, and the ego is no longer in control, and something of the soul, our inner essence, begins to have a say. And for me, it's something like this, that I wonder if the soul is the part of us that knows God, and the part of us that is known by God, the divine, that is in communion or conversation with the ineffable and the eternal and the nameless, is at home in that world. And when the ego is sufficiently dissolved and cracked open, like Moses coming down and smashing everything to bits, and you no longer know who you are, and there's an inner room in there. There's an inner Holy of Holies, it seems to me, that knows God and is known by God, but it's quiet. It's hard to speak about. And in some ways, it doesn't have a lot to do with belief, in my experience at least. In fact, I might even say that if I ponder, do I believe in God? I might say, well, the first thing I recognize is the desire for God. That I know. I don't know if I know it as a belief, but I know it as a desire, a longing, a craving, a hunger for the mystery. Yeah, that's present. That doesn't even require belief. That requires a kind of subtle consciousness, or an awareness that I have this craving, this hunger. I don't know where it comes from. It's like an instinct, the same instincts that for food and sex and shelter, and it's like that kind of primal longing. Yeah, do I believe in that? I know that feeling. I have that. And it's like a compass at times, and like it points, and sometimes it's hard to trust, and sometimes as we lose contact with it, it's like it evaporates, and or it goes into hiding like a shy animal. And I don't know, do you believe in God? Do you feel the longing, the desire? So yeah, I believe in as much as I know this desire. And part of me wonders if the desire itself is the other side of the tuning fork of the divine. And when it's rung, the divine hums the opposite wave, or however a tuning fork works, this wave-like spiral that is the resonance of our own being at home in the world. That's homecoming. And so whether or not I believe in statements about God, I'm not even saying they're wrong, but it's not exactly what I'm talking about, and it doesn't quite touch what I'm calling the desire for the divine. That can be trusted, I think, the desire. And just a shout out for beliefs, I often look down upon them and say they're not that important, but that's a kind of belief too. So I'd like to have more humility that beliefs do matter, and even the ways people have tried to name the divine, hey, at least there's a conversation present. And we ought not to lose the conversation, because what the hell else are we going to talk about? Have you noticed most things on the internet aren't really worth talking about? God, aren't you so sick of them? So I wrote down some questions, and I want to try to ask them and leave them in your lap and let you hear what is yours to hear. And there's a kind of solitude and even loneliness with such a question, do you believe in God? Most people who wrestle with that want the crowd, the madness of the crowd, to answer the question for us. Give us Barabbas, we all shout together. Give us, something that the group can cling to. And then after the glitz and smoke and fervor and flag waving and song singing and feel good group moments, then you lie down in your bed and you're awake at 3 a.m. That loneliness right there, that moment, is when the deeper question arises: do I believe in God? Or what is God? Maybe that's the first question I want to say.
Hey everyone, it's Kristen. Just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning in. I hope that you're finding these messages helpful for you in your everyday life. That's what we're trying to do here, is gather around the idea that life is a gift and love is the point, and let's give ourselves ways to move forward in that in our own everyday world. So I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being a part of this community. To those of you who have participated and given financially, we want to say thank you to you. Everything that we do here happens because people make contributions. People say, I value this place, I want it to exist for me and for other people, and so I'm going to support it. And so we just want to say how grateful we are that you do that. And for those of you who maybe haven't had a chance to contribute yet, we would ask you to consider maybe doing so. If you find this place beneficial, if you find these messages helpful for you, then consider joining us in that way. You can go to eastlakecc.com to make a contribution, and we just always are thankful for the people who want this place to exist. So thanks again for tuning in. Let's get back to the message.
Who or what is God to you? Who or what is the divine to you? And forget the quotations. Don't look anything up. What do you mean by God? To me, I'm not trying to be exhaustive, but God is something like a force. It's something like a question. The divine poses a certain kind of question on the psyche and on the soul and on our being. And maybe one way of saying it, at least for me, is God is the name for what is of ultimate concern. Maybe that's one way of putting it. What is of ultimate concern? To wrestle with the question, do I believe in God, is like wrestling with the question, do I believe, or do I care about, do I long for, do I desire what is of ultimate concern? And my answer to that is yes. And the moment that's out of my mouth, I also admit I don't know what's of ultimate concern. And there's the beautiful tension we shall carry to our grave. I don't know what is of ultimate concern. And that's my deepest longing. And that's the thing that's pulling me and luring me. What is of ultimate concern? And there's a kind of surrender, a kind of consent to that, at least in my view, that's necessary and kind of beautiful. And isn't all deep spiritual wisdom saying it's about surrender? So what would it be like to surrender to things that are of ultimate concern? Which means everything else is passing away. It's here one day and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, to quote Jesus. So yeah, I'm a person that would like to be about the things that are of ultimate concern, and I'd like to find out where I'm wrong. There might be things that I hold as ultimate concern that aren't. So maybe God is also the thing that disrupts what we think is of ultimate importance. That's sort of question number one. What was question number two? Question number two. What is my actual experience of the divine by any name? Even if the first thing out of your mouth is, I don't have one. That's a starting place. That seems to me to be important. What is my actual experience of the divine? One thing you can say about Jesus, about Christ, which stands right in the like a hinge the development of the Western world, even though Jesus was the Eastern. We all think about Christianity as being from the Western world, but it was born in the East. It's interesting in and of itself. But anyway, one thing we can say about Jesus is that the little hints and guesses that come out of his mouth seem to say you can have a direct, unmediated experience of the ineffable. That's what he called the spirit of the wind. You can have a direct, unmediated experience of the ineffable. It's possible. In fact, it's totally natural. It's as natural as the way the hummingbird knows how to fly from Florida across the Gulf of Mexico to Mexico. What? How is that possible? Yeah, that kind of thing. It's that natural. So, what's my question? What's your experience of the divine? What's your experience of the ineffable? What if you were just honest about it? And what are the most numinous and mysterious moments in your life, or encounters, or conversations, or whispers? What if you took them seriously, at least as seriously as you might take ordinary things like you need to make a living and raising kids and raising hell and all that stuff? Yeah. What is your actual experience of the divine, and what if you surrendered to that as well? Okay, question 3. It's kind of maybe not a necessary one, but it rattles around for me, and it has been lately. And it was rattling around when I was in Jerusalem, and it's something like this: is Christ, or Christianity, going now again into the tomb, into the womb, the tomb womb container? It seems like that, like something of the way we've held Christianity seems to be dying. And I, by the way, mean something different than what people call deconstruction of faith. Okay, fine. There's a moment for that. The death of something is not deconstruction. It's not like I used to think this and now I think this, and no, the whole thing, it goes into the earth. Like again, to quote Jesus, unless a grain of wheat dies, it remains a single seed. So the death of something, like the death of Christ again, or the death of Christianity as we've come to know it, and you know what that experience is like? It's like getting closer to the emptiness. It's like, now what? Now what? It's the 3 days between. Feels like we're at that kind of place globally. Even Eastlake is the kind of church that is curious about what's dying, what's not yet, reborn. It's the 3 days in between things. It seems like we're in that kind of place. And again, what if we surrendered to that? Which means, on one level, we have to surrender our ideas about God. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about when we say Christ. We don't know what we're talking about when we say Jesus. We don't know what we're talking about when we say Jesus saves. We don't know. We don't know. And that's not to say we don't know anything. It's not nihilism. It's like, well, there's no meaning, period. It's like the desire and the craving for what's of ultimate concern is still present. And still like a compass, though it's leading us. It's a compass that's working at night in the fog on the ocean. Seems that way to me. And so what even of your own ideas about Christianity, about Jesus, are going into the tomb, and you don't really want them to, but it's just what's happening, and your beliefs about these things. And what would it look like to have to surrender to the present state of the world as it is? Okay, let me think. I got one more question, and it's more of an observation, it's a reiteration of what I said a few minutes ago. It has to do with the soul. I mean, the soul is another one of those words like God. Like, do you believe in the soul? That'd be a worthy series too. And what do we mean by that? And sometimes I'm like, we should throw out words like God or soul, and then 2 minutes later I start using them. And it's because they have no bottom that I think they have a place. God is the name we give to the unnameable, and the soul is the name we give to our inner depths that's also unnameable. And see what you think about this premise of mine, that the soul is the part of us that knows God when the ego doesn't. The soul is the part of us that is known by God. Don't you know that feeling of wanting to be deeply known? Well, the soul is the part of us that is known by God. It's beneath the ego's pressing and urgent concerns and ideas and beliefs. And so it feels like that the ego has to die in order to taste such a thing. And maybe it's just a taste. It's just a small bite or a little whisper, like the way a lover might whisper something into your ear, and your whole body hums for a moment. And anyway, what do you think about the soul as the place that knows God? See, that's different than believes and is known. It knows and it's known. And what would it look like for you to take the life of your own soul more seriously? Like Jesus, again, keeps coming up a lot for me, obviously, in this talk. And what can you give in exchange for your soul? Yeah, good question, Jesus. What can you give in exchange for your soul? Nothing. So what does it look like? What would it look like to take the soul, the life of the soul, more seriously? And it might require something of a descent. Again, something like a surrender. Like, I guess my ego doesn't know what it's talking about. And there's a settling back into something. And the surprise is that, I had that image of Adam and God on the Sistine Chapel. Their fingers are almost touching. And life is like that. Like, the ineffable is just out of reach. And at moments, though, there's contact, there's communion, there's union, there's a taste of oneness. And it's just that, it's a taste. And then we experience, again, the distance. There's like a billion light years of distance between the finger of Adam and the finger of God. And also Adam is enveloped in the universe that is God. So it is a paradox that's present. And I think the life of the soul is what's most needed in the 21st century, a life of the soul. And a life that begins to turn its attention to things of ultimate concern. It's time to wrestle again with, do we believe in God? What is our experience of God? Who or what is God? And who ought to be wrestling with that? Not like, academics or, college freshmen in their first philosophy class. I mean, I'm glad, let the questions begin. But those inside, who in some way say, I have a spiritual life, or I'm part of the church, or I'm loosely part of the church, the insiders, that's who, Jesus says it's the sick who need healing, and the religious people are the sick people, it seems to me, and ought to be wrestling with these things. So, I don't know, maybe I want to land there. And my hope is that you'll hear a hint, a guess, a clue, a prompt, that something I said will, like a witch, stir your own cauldron and stir things up and I hope you'll trust that the mystery of your own soul, the mystery of your own essence, is in conversation with the ineffable. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.